So we're going to be talking about diversity through your talent lifecycle, and I think the panel before us and ACE's great keynote talked a lot about the importance of diversity and a diverse workforce and diverse teams, right? Produce better results. They help you track top talent. You have higher engagement, better retention, and then the impact on your communities are far more impactful, I guess, when you have a demographic of your workforce that matches the demographic of your populace. But we know that still remains a problem in today's workplace, especially in state and local government. So that's what we're going to talk about today. We may not solve it today. This is a pretty meaty topic. We have lots to cover, but we'll be brief, as quick as we can, and obviously available to talk afterwards for anybody that has more questions. And with that, Cecily, I'll hand it over to you to talk a little bit more about what we're going to get into today.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
I'm going to bounce in and out of some screen share here for you.
Awesome. Yep. So as most of you know, LinkedIn's the world's largest professional network. And the reason why I wanted to start and lead with that is when you think about the way that people are finding jobs today, if you can go to the next slide, Jay, basically 70% of jobs are actually filled through networking. So when you think about the power that LinkedIn has to help solve this diversity and this equity problem, a lot of people are coming to LinkedIn today, and we are able to assist government organizations that are trying to hire that talent. One of the things that we've been doing a lot of research on is where does this equity gap come from and what does that look like today? And so our CEO actually coined the term the network gap during our last Talent Connect. And what we found is that people from underrepresented groups are actually disproportionately impacted by having smaller networks. So if you could pull up the next slide, Jay. And what we found was that if you grew up in a high income neighborhood, you're actually 3 times more likely to have a stronger network. You're 2 times more likely to have a strong network if you're attending a top school, and you're 2 times more likely to have a strong network if you're working in a top company. So what that means today for when you guys are thinking about diversity and our talent attraction strategies, a lot of times what we're seeing is people are in a very narrow network mindset. And what we've been really focused on is how are we bringing everybody on board onto our network so that we're able to expand that equity across the board. The Harvard Business Review actually recently did an article about the impacts that COVID-19 has had on unemployment and how that varied across income groups. So one of the things that we saw was people from higher income jobs and things like that were more likely to widen their network during a time of crisis, whereas people from lower income communities tended to winnow their network. So they would be they would have a more insular focus and be turning to immediate friends and family. The problem with this is if we're not having strategies in place to be able to proactively tap the talent that's winnowing, that is already a more disadvantaged group, there's no way to achieve that equity that we talked about earlier.
And I am going to take back over here, and I'm going to share a slide. Ace, I promise I did not we did not talk about this, but when you look at some of the problems that are represented in state government has been historically extremely focused on equality in the past, right? Fair labor laws, fair housing, all this stuff is fair, fair, fair. But when you give everybody the same size box, Ace, as you were referring to, otherwise, let's just say that people's height is representative of their network, right? Those with the strongest network are going to have the best view, the most opportunity. But as Cecily pointed out, there's a massive network gap out there. If 70% of people are finding a job because they knew somebody or they were part of the in crowd or the old boys club or whatever the case may be, right? You've got 30% of the population. They're extremely talented, loaded with skills, but they just don't have the opportunity. So we believe, I love the fact that DEI isn't diversity equality, it's diversity equity, right? Because that really that helps us frame this and understand that there are ways you have to do something different. You have to give other people just as good of a shot. So we talked about a lot with government over the past several years. We've been doing this now for quite some time. And there are resounding themes that come up time and time again when it comes to obstacles for diversity in state and local government. We mentioned referrals. I'll say it again. Referrals have been oftentimes one of the commonest deterrents to expanding diversity within state government workforce, because people tend to know, people they know that look, talk, walk like them and things of that nature. And there's also a big tendency for intergovernmental movement, like agency to agency, department to department, even city to county, county to state, and then higher education. So there's a lot of movement of this light crowd already taking place. And then lastly, or not lastly, but in addition, there's serial appliers that come from the same talent pool. So if you're fishing in a pond that is only filled with bass, it is impossible to catch a trout. There is no chance, right? So you need to be looking in different talent pools, exploring different opportunities, turning over different rocks to find the different talent that's out there. This is extremely valuable, and again, full of all the skill sets that we're looking for today's modern workforce. And then lastly, another big inhibitor is, and I'll talk about this a little bit later when we get into a little bit about what the FBI did, but state government's processes oftentimes are of a disadvantage to those in different demographics. So making sure that your processes are both more modern and current and open to all different demographics when it comes to recruitment.
Awesome. So one of the things that we've seen across the board is that lack of expansion of your network and getting your name out there as an employer of choice and letting people know that you are looking and seeking out diverse talent. As we mentioned, more disadvantaged communities are going to be less likely to be finding you because they're more likely to have an insular network. So it's really important that you're doing what you can to get out and actually tap those people so that they feel at home, so that there's clear expectations of what your hiring process is going to look like. So you're getting out front and center. So what I pulled together was a list of examples of company updates that are on LinkedIn. You could also probably pull this for Facebook or any of the other social networks that are out there. But these are ways that companies are really focusing on how are we bringing diversity and inclusion to life and really telling our story and getting our corporate culture out there. And this is something that with the governments that we've been working with, this has been the top thing that has impacted the results that they're having and the way that they're attracting talent is how are you getting that story out there? Because people don't necessarily know the great work that government's doing or some of the diversity and inclusion programs that you have. So we can send this over afterwards as just some of the examples, but there's things like videos talking about employee resource groups or talking about why you're proud of the veterans that you've hired, doing things like employee spotlights or employee testimonials, or featuring programs that are helping disadvantaged people that are coming into state service be able to elevate their career trajectory over time. And then when we look at how are you engaging and how are we building these communities for diverse individuals on LinkedIn, just to give you a sense of the total reach that's out there, we have about 75% of the US workforce on our platform. And then when we look at how those diversity groups are actually filtering together, you can see you're able to reach things like bilingual individuals, women that are on there, military veterans, and also getting engaged in things like diversity groups. And also looking at where people attended school. So if there's historically Black colleges. So as you think about LinkedIn or anywhere else that you're outreaching, think about how those diverse members are engaging and where you can be proactively reaching out to them so that you can be getting your story out at scale as a government.
Awesome, and I think we're doing okay on time. Cecily, do we want to try and fire up the first Slido question that we had out there? Is the NASCA group ready for that? If not, we can keep going.
Yeah, no, it is
all right. We'll keep.
And so, yeah, if you've got a bit as we get that Slido running, you can go ahead, Jay.
All right, so we're going to go to Slido, same entrance, NASCA, or the hashtag NASCA20. And what is the top obstacle you encounter when you're trying to hire for diverse talent? Not everybody at once. Well, why don't we, while we get an active poll going, all right, here we go. We got some contributors, here we go. hiring managers, resources, both not uncommon. Government recruitment limitations, yep. We can talk about a little bit of that here in just a moment with the FBI's example. Availability, all right. Now I can't read them all, but obviously there are obstacles, right? We're not saying that this is easy, but resources seems to be the winning word cloud. Awesome. Well, thank you for that participation. We'll go back to the video only. So what I wanted to tell you a little bit was an example that the FBI did. And now, granted, you may not be thinking you all are the FBI, right? But this example could be used for anybody. Peter Searcy is one of the directors in human resources for the FBI. They went under, I think it was a 3-year journey in transforming how they went about attracting a different population of people for their special agent role. They have to hire thousands of special agents a year, and they were typically straight white men. So what they were trying to do is figure out where in the process was this broken that they needed to fix and review to try and improve this, or trying to fix this problem. So what they did is they literally started at the beginning. They realized they had no data to make directions off of. They had no plan to improve because they felt like they were getting the right number of applicants, when in fact, it was the same applicant, hypothetically on reoccurring. They had old attitudes, so there was a lack of willingness to change, especially at the senior leadership ranks, and had very old processes. Their application process for a special agent was arduous. They put it up on the screen at Talent Connect. Actually, at the end in a follow-up, we'll send you there's a YouTube video of his presentation at LinkedIn Talent Connect back in 2019. But the application process was arduous, multifaceted, but not terribly uncommon from state government. What they found is they had 40,000 people that started the application and didn't finish it. 40,000. That's a huge number of people, right? Even if you're trying to hire for thousands, 40,000 is a monster number. So what they found out is that they took their application process and they broke it up into 3 phases. They found that women and people of color decided that, or not decided, but they, for whatever reason, felt that that application may not be geared for them, and they were dropping out faster than white men. And they went out to their hiring managers and they found out what is the minimum amount of information that we need to get somebody into the system. And that's phase 1, that's it. They take the bare bones, like education, simple name, address, phone number, stuff like that. And if they meet minimum qualifications, they got reached out to by a recruiter, encouraged to then continue on with the process with some warm touch points along the way. 3 years, and they did a lot of other things, so we can't cover it all right now. But 3 years later, their number of female applicants went from the middle teens up to 35%, and they're confident they can get to 45% in the coming years, with 60 being their end goal. So they're trying to go from middle teens of female applicants for the special agent role up to 60%, just by looking at the process, breaking it down, taking corrective measure, and looking at the data. So if you're thinking this isn't something that you can do, you absolutely can. And there's a lot of use cases that we can provide to you to help you understand some different ways to go about that.
Awesome. Can we go ahead and pull up the second Slido poll now? And we're going to ask a similar question to the first one, but before we switch gears and go into obstacles for retention of diverse talent, we wanted to get a chance to hear from you guys on what some of your top obstacles are as from a retention perspective as you guys are thinking about diversity, inclusion, equity, and belonging. So we've got pay, sponsorship, compensation. So a lot of things around compensation and pay.
We hear and see role models a lot, especially the leadership ranks.
For sure. Also the organizational culture, making sure that you understand that. Intentional inclusion I love as well. Culture's getting larger there. Awesome. Well, this gives a sense of what some of those obstacles that you guys are encountering are. And as we talked about a little bit earlier, data is so critically important in any sort of diversity and inclusion strategy. And so Oh, we wanted to talk about a little bit about the importance of running employee surveys. A lot of people when I talk to government agencies, they'll say, oh, we run an employee survey and we do it every 3 years or something like that. And that's not really enough time to give you real-time data. So one of the things that I wanted to highlight was your employees can give you a lot of information. We recently acquired a company called Glint, and I was completely blown away when I saw what surveys in general can do these days. So when you're thinking about like, why is attrition happening on a particular team, or why aren't women ascending into leadership positions, or why are our diverse employees leaving our organization? It's really crazy the amount of data that you can get to today by running regular employee surveys. So to give a little bit of perspective, and I'm going to talk a little bit about a couple of things that LinkedIn did, because we had our own diversity problems a couple of years ago, and we've really had a huge turnaround in the number of diverse people that are coming into our workforce, and also the retention rates of those individuals. So one of the things that we started to do was more frequent surveying of our employees so that we could have a more frequent pulse check. So it's actually gotten to the point, we started out doing this quarterly, but we now get actually monthly employee surveys that give information to managers about how their teams are feeling, things along those lines. So as you're thinking about the importance of data, it's critically important that you're actually getting some of that data directly from your employee base, and that you have a pulse check and a way to understand exactly what they're thinking and feeling in the moment. The other thing that LinkedIn did that we've really transitioned over to is we've invested a lot in our employee resource groups and doing support of that. So every single one of our employee resource groups actually has an executive sponsor that's in a senior leadership position, and they actually work very closely hand in hand to make sure that we're bringing the culture of these various groups. So we have, I think, around 20 employee resource groups. So that ranges from Enable In, which is for disabled individuals who are working at LinkedIn. We have a veterans employee resource group. We have a Black inclusion group. Really, it's just up to what we've encouraged is all of our employees to feel empowered to start a group if they had some sort of identity that they were trying to bring life to. And what that's actually done is really change the way that our culture works across the board by celebrating a lot of these employee resource groups and being able to see the impact that these various groups are having. We're better able to understand the culture, and it started a lot of these conversations that are so important to have between employees, and building that cultural understanding or understanding of some of the obstacles that people are going through if they have a disability or something like that. So it's really opened up the importance of having those conversations internally and creating a culture where you're not shying away from those kinds of conversations, and you're able to celebrate the differences that are within your workforce. So when it came to a retention perspective, those were two of the areas that we really wanted to highlight that have had the biggest impact on our organization.
Yeah, and I would also add that those ERG groups, they're led by oftentimes individual contributors or less senior employees, and it's a great leadership development pipeline for people of different backgrounds to gain exposure, network, and then take a more leadership role in time within your organization. So can't echo the importance of ERGs enough.
Jay, do you have a sense of what the response rates are for the employee pulse surveys? I figured as a manager, you might have a better sense. That was a question that came through the feed.
No, but they've improved over time. I think they were fairly low early on when LinkedIn started doing them, but I know now they're up over 85, 90%. So they're pretty high now. Managers, I mean, it's a very, very big part of our culture. Managers only get scores if enough people take them. Otherwise, managers don't get any feedback or information. And then there's not scrutiny there, but there's a lot of like, inspect what we expect type efforts there. And there's no necessary stick that comes with it. We try to use more of a carrot on those.
I think that the other thing that really bolstered the response rates is it used to be really long. As someone that had to fill those out all the time, it was terrible. But we actually got it down to like now there's only 10 questions, and it's a lot of like rankings that are still able to push that forward. So I would say that as you're also thinking about your surveying, figuring out what the minimum amount of information that's going to give you the information that you need. And there's plenty of firms, whether that's, I think Deloitte mentioned that they were doing some things in this area. There's Glint, there's SurveyMonkey, there's tons of resources that are out there that are working in this space. But figuring out like, how can you do this in the most efficient process possible so that your employees aren't feeling overwhelmed by it?
And we are coming up on time, so I appreciate the questions. If there are further questions, Cecily and I can make ourselves available through normal channels, email, phone calls, et cetera. Looking forward to speaking with everybody. One other thing that we did want to just close with in wrapping, I think Cara from Colorado and some others mentioned learning and development, not only their frontline employees, but their leaders when it comes to diversity, equity, and inclusion, or diversity, equity, and belonging, and DIBS as we call it. There's a LinkedIn Learning course that if you're not a LinkedIn Learning customer, you can still have access to. We've made it free for everybody through the rest of the year. It's like a 5-hour, 7-course training path that you can give to your entire organization or to your entire leadership group. We'll follow that up with everybody as a takeaway if you want to encourage people to take those online courses. There's a tremendous amount of information out there from unconscious bias all the way down. So hopefully this information was useful for everybody. It's definitely not something, fixing a diversity inclusion, I wouldn't just call it a problem, but trying to improve the numbers when it comes to diversity, equity, and inclusion isn't an overnight process. It's a multi-year journey, and I think for those that are underway, kudos to you, and those that are looking to get started, no time like the present, and if there's something we can do to help, we'd be happy to.